everybody. This is Tina Katola and Katia
Slivinskaya.
Katia Slivinskaya. I will get it perfect at some point, even
I'm
though
sure it won't take
I
long.
get it perfect because we just did a video on perfectionism. But what we're talking about right now is the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Now, a Saturn-Pluto conjunction is a rare event. We're going to talk about what it means when someone has it in their birth chart. So we'll put in the comments below where in the video that is. So if you're watching this to learn about that, because of your own chart or somebody that you know, you can go right to when we start talking about it towards the second part of the video. But what we're talking about at the beginning of the video is more of a current event, which at the time that we are now recording this, it's October of 2019, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction as a transit is coming into effect right now. It's basically affecting everybody. It's going to be exact in the middle of January of 2020, and it's going throughout. That's the only time it's exact, actually, which is interesting, because a lot of times when there's a transit, it happens, it has an exact pass several times. But this particular one is just doing it once, but it's still going to be affecting throughout the year of 2020. So we'll talk about what that means as far as how it affects us as individuals and also how it affects us collectively. Now, the last time there was a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and as I mentioned, it's a rare event, was in 1982. And when that happened, I had my best friend, and he was best friend and a mentor of mine, Utana Olsen-Dunn, who was passed away in 2005. But she was, at that point in time, had been going through second, third stage Capricorn for a long time. And I knew two other people. So she had the Saturn-Pluto conjunction squaring her sun. So traditional astrology would say, okay, that's doom. Because the sun is us, our soul, our energy, our vitality. And Saturn and Pluto are the two big guns in astrology. So the two big guns come together when Saturn and Pluto are conjunct. And traditional astrology says, oh, that's really bad, because you know we've got the mafia boss and the ruler, the corrupt ruler of some third world country that's they're joining forces, and they're whumping us. That's what certain astrological perspectives would look at it as being. However, from an evolutionary perspective, Saturn and Pluto are the two most important planets in terms of profound transformation within ourselves. So because my friend had been spiritually focused for a long time, for many years, this square, what I say about squares is they mean something must happen. If you're having a square to any part of your chart, but especially to the sun, anything that hasn't been dealt with, you have to deal with it. There's a change that has to occur. There's a strong force. But if somebody's wanting change anyway, it's a profound catalyst. Different astrological influences they're very much like waves on the ocean. So if you get a really big wave and you've been practicing on your surfboard for a long time, you can just surf that wave like you just wouldn't believe. It's the most incredible, amazing thing. So what my friend did when the Saturn-Pluto conjunction squared her sun was she went into her room for 3 days and went into a deep state of meditation. Now, the thing that was really interesting about this is that she couldn't meditate. She had a Mars-Mercury conjunction, and people who have Mars-Mercury conjunctions really have a struggle to meditate because their minds are so profoundly busy. They have their minds move faster than everybody else's. They have 3 or 4 different thoughts all going on at once. A lot of people who have Mars-Mercury conjunctions wake up in the middle of the night with insomnia and their brains won't switch off. And, you need to take some white chestnut Bach flower remedy to settle it down. So she had given up on meditation. She said, no, meditation is not for me. And I agree that for most people who have Mars-Mercury conjunction, this is not going to be their thing. And yet, at this point in time, you know, it really almost does remind me of my metaphor of the caterpillar, the cocoon, and the butterfly, right? She went into the cocoon.
Exactly.
But she went into this completely internalized process of transformation that was utterly painless, utterly blissful. She walked out of the room and she looked like a completely different person. She glowed. She was exquisite. She was exquisitely herself at that point in time. So she had become so much of who she was. She transformed so many things. So much of her purpose was just totally fulfilled at that point. She walked into a new world. So it's just fascinating. Now, I knew two other people who had that Saturn Pluto conjunct their sun. Do you want to say something?
Can I just pause? So was it from the point of view of the three stages and the caterpillar, cocoon, and the butterfly, did she walk out of that 3-day experience, meditative inner state experience, in third stage, would you say?
Yes, absolutely. She walked out in third stage Capricorn fully. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was her moment of alchemy.
Thank you, Saturn and Pluto.
Now, many times when Pluto aspects the sun, it can be a push. If a conjunction, square, or an opposition, maybe a quincunx sometimes too, can be a push to move into another stage. That's a very, very common. Certainly people are going to go to another stage of development when they have that transit. Mm-hmm. Now, the other two people I knew, one had been working on consciousness to a certain extent and just had very bizarre experiences with weird sexual experiences and strange people following them on the subway. And it was just a collection of strange, bizarre, unusual, weird things kept happening that were 1 in a million.
What was their sun sign?
Libra, because this was the Saturn Pluto conjunction in Libra in 1982 and early 1983. So it conjuncted the suns of people who were born in late Libra. It's interesting. This Saturn Pluto conjunction is in late part of Capricorn. That one was in the late part of Libra. So it's kind of sitting in the same general zone. So,
yes.
So it's kind of interesting that way. Now, the other person I knew who had it conjuncting their sun had horrible tragedies happen around them, had authority figures attack them unjustly. It was very traumatic. But this was a person who was not conscious. And so that's where I guess the big guns come in and say, wake up. What are you doing in your life? Why is your life the way it is? It makes you ask, why is this happening? What's going on? It's not that the planets do this to people. It's that there's a part of them, a part of the inner being within the person that wants to take the opportunity that this giant leap forward in evolution is offering.
Yes.
So if we're consciously aligned with our souls, then we will listen completely. So my friend listens. She goes and lies in bed for 3 days and didn't have to do anything. My soul just transformed all by itself.
And it also sounds like what you're also very much speaking to is the power of preparation.
Yes. Yes.
And if we're doing this spiritual work and awake already,
yes,
then Saturn Pluto conjunction can kind of take us over the edge, or it can, it can take what we're already prepared for, maybe, and and that launch it. Yeah. And that can be more conscious.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And if you're open and you haven't really prepared the ground, even having an openness can provide you with fuel to question and to learn from. But if you're not open and there's a deeper part of your own inner being that wants you to be open, it may express its frustration at the fact that you're not open by creating crisis. By bringing into a situation. Because in both cases, this person walked into situations where something was happening. So something in them took them into that situation.
Right.
And I'm not giving any details about this because I don't have that person's permission to go into details. I don't want to say anything about it for their sake. It's not, it's not the right thing to do. Yes. But, I just have always been so aware of those 3 different examples of how our perspective influences how these transits affect us. So this is why, again, if you get a cookie cutter computerized readout of what this transit means, it can have, sometimes it could be of value if it's worded in such a way as to allow for the fact that you're going to respond in your own unique way and to talk about the underlying principles that these transits express. So to understand more about it, we need to understand more about what do Saturn and Pluto do in general.
Yes.
So Saturn, I always talk about it as being the most important transiting planet. It is the transiting planet that is always influencing or always marking out where our inner center of gravity is focused in the most important way.
Mm-hmm.
In traditional astrology, Saturn rules both time and gravity.
Mm-hmm.
So from my perspective, one of the meanings that I give that is that Saturn, where Saturn is transiting our chart, says what time it is in our lives. This
Mm-hmm.
is what it's time for us to look at, and this is what has weight to us.
Mm-hmm.
This is the part of life that feels like, yeah, this is the heavy part of life right now. This is what really means something. And people often find when Saturn changes houses, which it does about every 2.5 years, aha, now I know what's really important in life.
Yes. Right. How have I missed it for this long?
Yes.
Well, actually, something else was really the thing that was important.
Exactly.
One house ago. Yeah.
That's right. And the houses are interesting because they represent departments of life, and many different life experiences are all categorized into one house. And so for each person, those experiences may all show up when that house gets stimulated, or maybe just one or two at different times when an important planet transits that house. But all of the qualities are similar to these things that are all ruled by a house. But as soon as we move to the house beside it, they're very dramatically different things. These houses are quite different from one another.
Mm-hmm.
So we have houses that are about freedom and an unstructured experience of life. And then we move into a house that's all about structure and responsibility.
I think I know which ones you're talking about.
I was thinking about your chart. Yes.
Yeah. So Saturn just moved into my 10th.
Yes.
Not too long ago. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And for me, I had Saturn and Pluto for many years, which I'll get to that in a minute, how this lines up with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in my 4th house, which is home and it's retreative. And now it's going in the 5th house, which is expression. Mm-hmm. So I was inside, now I'm going outside.
Yep.
So it's dramatic difference. So this is why we go, oh, now I know what's really important. Saturn is also a renovator. So whatever house it's moving through and whatever planets it aspects, it says, all right, so what do we really need here? What do we need to get rid of? What do we need to strengthen? What do we need to change? Which walls are we going to take down? Are we going to put new carpeting in? So it's very practical, serious, wants to rebuild this part of our lives. It makes us aware of whatever the problems are. We can't get away with anything. Saturn's a very traditional sort of school teacher. But Saturn also likes to build things that are of lasting value. Mm-hmm. So Saturn's the renovator. Pluto, if Saturn's a renovator, Pluto's the demolition expert. Mm-hmm. Never mind renovating, we'll just demolish the whole thing and we'll build something completely new. But Pluto is also power, incredible power. Mm-hmm. So fascinating because it's so far away and it's so tiny.
Yes.
But that actually lines up with Chinese philosophy, because in the Chinese philosophy, there's yang and yin, and yang is strength and power, and yin is soft, and yin is large. Any large being or large object is yin. Mm-hmm. Small objects, short people, are yang.
Yeah.
It's the little dog.
Yes.
It's the little dog that's going to bite you. Don't worry about the Great Dane. He's a big goofball. He's he's a soft little marshmallow on the inside. But watch out for that little dog because he's a big dog inside. So
totally. Yeah.
That's the same thing with Pluto. It's representative of that really intense thing that often sleeps, but wants to massively transform things. But also, if it won't demolish a beautiful building. What it will do is it will go and turn on the lights, turn on the juice to make that building 1,000 times more brilliant and forceful and expressive. So Pluto only demolishes what needs to be demolished. Pluto will strengthen what needs to strengthen. So if we go back to the original example of my old best friend, because she had prepared so much for that full actualization of herself on a spiritual level. All that happened was, as far as Pluto was concerned, was Pluto just turned on the lights.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what happens, we all have Saturn transiting our chart somewhere, and we all have Pluto transiting our chart somewhere, and Pluto moves a lot more slowly than Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why we haven't had a Saturn-Pluto conjunction for so many years. So Saturn's been going round and round for a long time, and Pluto's been moving more slowly, and then Saturn finally came around and caught up to Pluto again.
Yeah.
Now, what's important to understand for how it's affecting us as individuals is certainly what planets is it aspecting, but for everybody, it's going to be in a specific house. Some people are going to have it aspect their planets, some people aren't, but everybody has it in one or more houses.
Mm-hmm.
If you're changing houses, it may affect more than one house.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have had, how would I explain this? If we have had Pluto in a house for quite a long time, what it's going to feel like right now is that Saturn's finally coming along and really letting things move along in a very practical way. It's
Mm-hmm.
also making all the things that haven't changed yet feel a lot more crucial and important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Pluto can make us get obsessive about whatever house it's going through. It can give us, it can appear to give us grief because it's doing is intensifying the whatever unconscious stressful patterns we have around that part of life. Well, Saturn comes along and says, well, let's look at reality here.
Yes.
Let's rebuild all of this.
Yes.
So Saturn can calm us down about our Pluto transit if we use it the right way. But some days, like yesterday, October 13th, we had a full moon squaring
Pluto.
Saturn. So, I realized that about 2:30, quarter after 2 p.m., which was right almost as it was exact, or just after it had been exact, because I was obsessing over something. I was freaking myself out. And I went, hold on, wait a minute. And it's useful to understand transits because if you, it's not, again, it's never that the planets make us do this, but they are they are coinciding with and reflecting something that is going on, and they are wonderful markers of what's going on in the mass mind. So here I am all by myself freaking out about whatever I was freaking out about. But when I recognized this particular transit was going on, I realized, oh, I'm there with several hundreds of millions of people that are all freaking out at the same time. So I'm just going to step out of the mass mind right now and just relax. And it probably took me about 5 or 10 minutes, and I was like, oh, everything's wonderful. Because, and if I had not had that astrological knowledge and used it correctly, I wouldn't have been able to just pop the bubble right away.
Yes.
So it's important to pop the bubble a bit more often than usual while we're going through this transit, because every now and then it's going to feel really heavy. It's going to feel really intense. And the mass mind is going to be very intense. And not only do we owe it to ourselves to break with that mass mind panic or depression or intensity, but we also owe it to the rest of humanity, because everybody who breaks out of those things helps everybody else do the same thing.
So I wonder, I have 2 questions. One is also, if just going back to what you said about Pluto has been sitting in a house for a while and then Saturn comes along. Is there also a quality of, because Pluto is further away, it's the further, outermost planet, is there a more unconscious, is its effect more unconscious?
It can be, yes. And that can depend on the person and on the part of the chart that it's moving through. So everybody has a different relationship with the planets. And one of the things that's really valuable in terms of studying astrology, even if you don't want to become an astrologer, but to just know certain things about the planets and to know what's going on in your chart to a degree, and to learn to understand the basic principles that the planets are expressing, to learn how to create a constructive relationship with these principles. Because then we make the best of our lives. Astrology is often used to try and predict what's going to happen. And occasionally that's helpful, but the most important thing is to understand now. And to have power in the moment, and to have power in our conscious awareness of what's going on. So some people don't notice Pluto transits very much. They are not, in some ways, they are not ready for the transformation that they can bring. So they're just not activating that.
Yeah.
In some ways, it's going on for such a long time that they think of it as being just normal life. It's actually
Yes.
the Pluto transit.
Yeah.
So different people are focused more intensely on different planets. So some people really, really, really notice their Pluto transits. They're very, very aware of them. And again, because Pluto is so intense, we can get into this situation where we get tricked by that intensity, and we start obsessing in a negative way over that part of life. And it's really important to go, no, I'm not going to look at that. I'm going to consciously put my attention on positive ideas, positive knowledge, positive images concerning this area of my life, knowing that Pluto is going to intensify that if I just give it enough
Positive.
time to focus on the positive.
Yes. Yes.
So if anyone's been doing that, whether consciously or unconsciously, and Saturn comes along now, Saturn will help stabilize that and cultivate that.
And is Saturn also a planet that matures things and areas of
Yes,
our psyche?
definitely.
So it sounds like there's a transformational effect, and also whatever area, we're talking still on the personal level, whatever area is being transformed, there's a quality of that Saturn wants to help us make that lasting. Saturn actually wants to help us mature that part of ourselves.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
That sounds like a very powerful combination for spiritual transformation, for personal transformation in whatever area, if we're willing to look at where that is in our chart and consciously bring our work there, our focus there, our consciousness there, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely. And now for people who are having it happening at the end of a house, that's particularly a very, very powerful opportunity to bring in an incredible harvest in that area of life. Because we've spent maybe 10 years, 15 years, 7 years, depending on what size your house is, of Pluto doing intensive work, and then Saturn's been doing work for a year or two sometimes, and then we're reaching a point where it's going to be, even if it was just one of those planets, there'd be a kind of harvest going on. But for both of those planets,
Yeah,
we have a lot taking place. Now, other people are going to be having this conjunction start at the beginning of a house. So that's a whole other powerful sort of experience, because that whole feeling of, well, now I know what's really important in life, that we always get when Saturn changes houses, is magnified a million times by Pluto. It's like, well, now for once in several lifetimes, I know what's really important in life.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so that's also another thing to look at, is where is this in the house? Is it in the beginning? Is it in the end, toward the end? Or
yes, definitely. And for some people, Saturn or Pluto entering a house can stir things up that we didn't realize were there, or we didn't expect to have happen, because there's this intense desire to transform things. We've got the renovator and the demolition expert right at the start of a project. They're both coming in with all the heavy machinery and all the instruments to measure.
And we may not have even known that our kitchen is what was next on the list if we're not astrologically, informed.
It's true.
Right.
So again, it's really important. Don't fear not, if at all possible.
Yeah. I mean, just as a personal example, while we're still in the personal area, I'm having this happen in my 10th. And if I was not aware of, what was going on, I could just think that there's a large vendetta against my career right now ever happening, because, there's just so much pressure. And, that's another very Saturn word, is pressure, and a lot of feeling of just like, no, I will not let you get away with this, without you really paying attention, without you really doing this right. And, no, these little details, I'm not just gonna, scratch them or waive their importance.
Yes.
So it's actually that astrological awareness that's allowing me to see that this is allowing me to grow what's so important to me right now from the ground up. Whereas if I didn't have that awareness, I could just, you know, feel like, oh, I better give up on the whole thing because it's just, you know,
Exactly.
clearly the universe doesn't want this to happen.
Yes, yes, exactly. Which is actually the opposite.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
the opposite. This is so important. You really got to start from an incredibly clean, solid, powerful position. So let's shake all the trees to make sure they're solid. Let's just clean out the whole foundation. And
and it's, you know, that process of making friends with Saturn, I think is just, you know, such a helpful thing to do, like the sooner that we can. I don't know if you agree, Tina. Because
I totally do.
Wherever it goes in our chart, it's going to have that quality of, I'm going to shake the trees. I'm going to unearth anything that you're hiding. And to actually become okay with it can really, you know, improve just our own relationship to learning.
Yeah, and the teacher's going to inspect your desk no matter what you do. So you may as well make friends with the teacher.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Well, Saturn likes apple polishers. He definitely does.
Yeah, you want to be the teacher's pet with Saturn, right?
Yes, you do.
Yeah. Because also the gifts of Saturn are so dang good.
They are. Yeah, they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the old astrological saying that Saturn gives as much gold as he does lead. And that's a real alchemical saying. But it's absolutely true because Saturn really wants what's absolutely best for you. In tarot, the major arcana is every single major arcana card represents either a planet or a sign of the zodiac. And the world is the tarot card for Saturn. And in tarot, the world represents that final outcome of absolute bliss and perfection and balance, wholeness. What my best friend was when she stepped out of that bedroom so many years ago.
Yes, just got chills.
Yes.
So I wonder, are we ready to talk about what might be happening, what we might feel, what we might observe on a collective level?
Yeah, I think we pretty much are. I just want to mention that what Saturn wants for us is Saturn wants to give us that perfection of the world. Saturn wants to give us the world. So Saturn's really very loving. We have to remember that Saturn has our best interests in mind. This is not just, you know, sometimes we have a really rough, nasty school teacher who has their own hidden compulsions and you know, emotional issues they're taking out on the poor child.
Yes.
Saturn's not like
that's not Saturn.
That's not Saturn. You might think so sometimes because of Saturn really wanting to, let's get there as fast as we can, but let's stop and be thorough about it.
Yes.
There's a Rosicrucian motto, make haste slowly, and I think that's a good Saturn's motto.
Yes. Very much. That's very much. I'm very much feeling that. That's interesting that you say that.
Yeah.
I'm very much feeling that in my 10th house. Yeah.
And I think everybody is right now with this Saturn Pluto conjunction coming together, and it's in the sign of Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. So Saturn really rules this transit.
Yes.
And I was thinking about just as, you know, the last time I was actually out doing errands and things and trying to get stuff done, I was like, well, just make haste slowly. You'll get there.
Yes.
You can feel it.
Make haste slowly.
That reality is so strong right now.
I love that saying. I want to write it down. Yeah.
So what's going on with the collective, now that's really interesting because Pluto always talks about the collective transformations that are going on. So we've had Pluto in Capricorn for quite a while now. We've had Pluto, I'm trying to remember, when did Pluto go into Capricorn? I think it was 2008, January 2008.
Okay. I can look at an ephemeris if you...
Yeah, I'm pretty certain it was January 2008 because that's when I got involved with the Global Warming Project. Yeah. And then, oh yeah, Pluto in Capricorn. Okay. But as whatever sign Pluto is going through, that is what humanity as a whole is going through, mass transformations about that area of life. So I always think of Pluto in Capricorn as transformations around the concept of our glorious leader, because it's about large institutions, it's about traditional forms of power, it's about what it is that people we will view as rulers and icons and traditional symbols of authority or accomplishment. Everybody's getting a massive, huge, deep, profound collective lesson about those principles. So we've got the Saturn Pluto conjunction. Yes, it's exact in the middle of January of 2020, but it goes through until the end of October of 2020. And we're going into, in the United States, there's an election year. The Saturn Pluto conjunction is going on. So Saturn is saying, okay, what's the true reality about the principles of our collective goals, our institutions, our crystallized forms of institutions, and our glorious leaders?
Yes. Yeah. And it was January 2008 that Pluto went into Capricorn on the 27th. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of talk about impeachment going on right now in the United States, which I'm in the United States. For those of you that don't know, Tina is actually in Canada.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And we're actually in the middle of an election here ourselves. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. You see. I didn't even know that.
No.
Embarrassingly.
It's the Northern Banana Republic. Who knows what's going on in it?
Well, probably a lot of people do. I'm just gonna hold that comment.
A lot of Americans don't, and
a lot of Americans don't.
Most Canadians know more about American politics than they do about Canadian politics.
Really?
Yes, it's true.
It's true that the United States politics keeps the world entertained.
Very true. Yes, entertained or traumatized.
Entertained or
depending on where you're living and what's going on with everything. But,
yes. Yes.
But there are lots of things going on in politics all over the world that are very significant right now with this Saturn-Pluto conjunction.
Yes. So do you want to mention any of those things?
And they will continue to be going on.
Yeah.
Well, it's lining up with something that I want to do a separate video on, which are the Chaldean cycles.
How do you, what was the word? The what cycles?
Chaldean cycles.
The Chaldean, got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are 36-year astrological cycles that it was spring of 2018. Make sure. No, spring of 2017. That's right. Spring equinox of 2017 was when we entered a new Chaldean cycle, which is, so since then, politics have shifted a great deal. And that Chaldean cycle every Chaldean cycle is ruled by a planet and a sign. Chaldean cycle we're in right now is Saturn and Aries. So both of those are, again, about authority figures, about a more right-wing or conservative approach to life. They're very much about control, but also about order and self-discipline. And, their higher expression is about having a purified approach to the responsibility of putting ourselves and our lives in order. That's the higher expression of the Saturn in Aries.
Saturn in Aries.
Yeah, Saturn Aries.
Which is interesting because that's Saturn's fall.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it is. Now, it doesn't, I'm sure there's some element of an effect that has. I know when we were in the Mars Capricorn cycle, that's the exaltation.
That's the exaltation.
That would be good, but it was not very pretty when that cycle happened. That covered both world wars.
Wow. Okay.
Hiroshima.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was pretty intense. So when I look at that, I think, well, if Mars exalted in Capricorn was not a tea party, maybe Saturn in fall in Aries doesn't have to be so bad.
Doesn't have to be so bad, right?
But
right. Well, regardless, it's got its own unique imprint that beyond good or bad, that's never an ultimately very helpful
no, it's true.
lens.
And when you look at even the historical things that happened when there was the Mars Capricorn Chaldean cycle, they look horrendous from the outside, but the kinds of transformation that specific individuals went through on a massive level was profound.
Right, right. So, so we're talking about sort of the collective and what we're feeling with Saturn and Pluto conjunction going on in the collective.
There's been since the spring equinox of 2017 a profound swing to the right. And we've had two Chaldean cycles for 72 years, which emphasized the more of a left-wing perspective. So you could say we're due for the positive aspects of the right wing.
Yes.
And the Saturn Pluto conjunction has the potential to clean out the negative aspects of it.
Yes. So I wonder, you mentioned earlier that Saturn is the renovator. And there's that sort of, and Pluto is the demolisher, right? So there's that feeling of we need to demolish the things that are not working before we can actually, put in the new appliances and make everything really nice and polished. So I'm thinking collective on the level of nations, of course. I'm thinking of things that are going on that large, that really large level. I'm also thinking of, things that are happening in even smaller institutions like schools and, churches, or, I haven't seen it in churches, but I've seen in smaller local institutions, any corruption that's going on, even the ones that looked angelic from the outside, that you thought, oh, nothing bad ever happens in that, this is everyone there is an angel. And, and then it's like, oh no, there was corruption just like everywhere else there,
Yes. That's what Pluto through Capricorn is about churning out the corruption, making it visible.
Yes.
You can't hide it anymore. And now Saturn's coming along and going, we really can't hide it anymore. Because even if you go back to 2008, when Pluto first entered Capricorn, that's when the market crash happened.
Right.
Crash. And as a result of that market crash, all the corruptions in banks, and real estate industry, investment industries, was all brought out. That was brought to light. When Pluto first entered Capricorn, so many things came to light about what was wrong in established institutions, because that's what Capricorn rules on a collective level, established institutions. Now Saturn's coming along and it's really saying, let's get very real with this now, people.
Yes. So, and this is very interesting because I'm seeing it happen. I'm seeing how also the collective, the way that Saturn Pluto is affecting the collective, that we're unearthing the corruption, that we're seeing, okay, this is where the dirty laundry is, and we need to clean it up. And one thing that I notice that is almost like a warning, and I wonder if you would agree with this, is that it's not about demonizing or making those whole, like throwing away the baby with the bathwater and saying, oh, that whole institution is wrong, let's just scrap it, or anarchy. It's not, it's like, it's more like, no, we need to do our dirty laundry. We need to do that. And if we do, we can actually restore order. And there is a positive place to order.
Yes. You're absolutely right. I totally agree with you. Yeah.
And the other thing I was going to say is just that I'm seeing how the way that Saturn Pluto is acting on a collective level is also affecting how it's influencing people individually. So, someone might be going through a transit Saturn Pluto in their second house.
Yes.
And the institution that they worked for, suddenly the corruption becomes, comes to light, and that person's livelihood is affected.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the second house is our money, our financial resources, personal financial resources, but it's also our personal values.
It's also our personal values.
So all of that could
Absolutely.
be brought up when someone's got that in their second house. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they could reach a point too, because they've been building that area of their lives for a long time, when they actually have a lot more power to express and enforce their personal values to be part of that transformation. That's another way that can work out.
Yes. So you're pointing to how we actually, you mentioned power, and now you're highlighting it more, like that Pluto can actually give us a sense of power in that area of our lives that we didn't feel before. Yeah.
Exactly. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. And, I wonder if on the collective level, maybe collectively we've kind of just been in resignation, thinking, we can't really do much about the government. We can't really do much about the big institutions. And now we're like, you know what? Maybe we have to, because who else is going to do it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I wonder also, Tina, what you think about, the sign after Capricorn, not so much for Pluto, because Pluto's state hangs out for a while, but for Saturn is going to go into Aquarius.
Yes.
So I wonder if you want to say anything about how this is sowing the seeds for what Saturn and Aquarius brings.
Well, to a degree. The only thing is that I haven't noticed that Saturn, when it goes through the signs, has an incredibly profound effect on the collective. It does when there are specific aspects, when Jupiter and Saturn make aspects to one another, then there's a collective thing that goes on at that point. Certainly this Saturn-Pluto aspect is pretty powerful.
Yeah. Okay.
But certainly Saturn Aquarius is more of a breath of fresh air, and it certainly has more to do with expanding beyond the traditional. Right now we can't ignore the traditional right now. We have to renovate it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Right. Exactly. We can't ignore it. We have to renovate it.
Mm-hmm. And then when we renovate it, because what's interesting with these Chaldean cycles is that it can take them a little while to catch on and get their mojo really properly going.
Mm-hmm.
So this is happening pretty early on in this Chaldean cycle, 36-year cycle. We're just going into we're finishing up, I guess. Well, we're 2.5 years into it right now, so we're going to be going into year three next year.
Mm-hmm.
Or having achieved 3 years by the spring equinox and going into year 4.
Yeah.
It can get that going so that its higher principles start to express itself.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm.
Because,
yeah.
It's been worrisome for certain people. Certain people have looked at what's been going on and going, "Oh God, what's happening to the world?"
Absolutely.
All these despots are taking power everywhere. It's really kind of what's happened.
So what would you say about that, that feeling that like it's getting worse? Is it like getting worse before it's getting better, or what, is it a cleanse kind of effect?
Yeah. Well, in a way, again, having 72 left-wing years, the right wing became a shadow. Even though there are people who always upheld its positive values, it became a shadow. So if it became a shadow figure, well, sure enough, it's going to produce shadow figures when it first comes out of the closet.
Right. That makes sense. Is there a possibility for integration?
Yeah. I mean, really, we do look. It's not as though we completely ignore the things that have been built.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of really important rights have been built into our world. 72 years before this current cycle.
Absolutely. Exactly.
We can't just trash all of that.
Right.
We'll integrate and build on that.
Right. So is it like, how can we also integrate the light side of what the right is bringing?
Yeah.
While keeping what we've built,
Mm-hmm.
and just sort of keep that momentum going because we're always trying to bridge dualities, right? And
Yes,
integrate dualities.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Yeah, so I think I'm probably ready. We can now talk about what it's like if somebody has a Saturn Pluto conjunction in their birth chart.
Beautiful.
And because it's a pretty rare aspect, there's really only, I mean, it's not that likely that somebody over the age of 100 is going to be watching this. So I'm not going to talk about what 110-year-olds or whatever. It was quite a while ago
Yes.
that we had the Saturn Pluto conjunction that was 3 times ago. So we're going to talk about the last conjunction in 82, 83, and the one before that, which was the end of 1946 into the middle of 1948.
Yep. Okay.
So people born in those time periods have Saturn Pluto conjunction. Now, to be more precise, there's such a thing as orbs, which is how far apart something has to be before we consider that it's in aspect. People use different orbs.
Yep.
So I'm just using a bit of an estimated orb here for these dates. You may feel, if your birthday is close to these dates but not quite in them, that some of what I'm going to say does apply to you anyway. So bear that in mind. But what I'm using here is the end of October of 1946 to middle of January of 1947 was a Saturn Pluto conjunction in Leo. And then they kind of moved apart quite a bit. And then from July of 1947 to August of 1948, we have the Saturn Pluto conjunction. And that was the Saturn Pluto conjunction in Leo. Now, that's an interesting, because in a certain way, the Pluto in Leo is a little bit like Pluto in Capricorn, because the Pluto in Leo generation, and there were people born before that who had Pluto in Leo, and quite a few people born after those dates that had Pluto in Leo, everybody born during a Pluto transit is coming in a generational pack. These larger planets talk about what our deeper generational drives are. So so never mind talking about baby boomers or millennials or Generation X. So that's not really real. The real understanding, the real construct of generations has to do with the astrological generations. So the Pluto in Leo generation, they actually have a very deep subconscious sensitivity to power, to dignity, to whether they're being honored or respected by the outside world. There's as a collective transformation, because our generation's Pluto is what we are subconsciously sensitive to, like our sore foot, our sore toe, our subconscious sore toe, and our collective lifelong transformation experience. And that's another video that I'm sure I intend to make, is video about these generations and what they all represent.
Yeah.
It's going to be so much fun.
It'd be great.
Yeah. At any rate, so the Pluto and Leo generation, it's all about, well, what is my power? How am I being seen? How am I being respected? Is my dignity being respected? How is power being used collectively? So this was the hippie generations. This was a generation that was fighting the powers and wanting to tear down the wrongful powers. It's a lot of Pluto and Leo. I think it's pretty forceful. The lion is roaring for transformation. Now, a person who has Saturn conjunct, Saturn has to do with our own personal fears. So we have first of all, whenever we have the Saturn Pluto conjunction in somebody's birth chart, their personal fears are in a deep alignment and resonance with the generational insecurities and the generational subconscious drives. So it means that your own personal fears can go on a rampage sometimes. That's basically the bottom line, because Pluto intensifies personal fears, and it's very much for the Saturn and Leo generation, it's very much a fear that I will not be recognized, my importance will not be seen. And so if something happens that triggers that fear, I've seen a lot of Saturn, Pluto, and Leo people really overreact, and they may overreact in an extroverted fashion. And, you know, they just take offense to what somebody's doing or saying when the person didn't mean anything by it necessarily.
Right.
It's just triggered the insecurities. And of course, if they did mean it, then the Saturn and Pluto person can be really devastated by it, or can get into a very big power struggle with somebody about it. And it, you know, it's a long-term struggle. They can also react to this fear of not being seen and not being of value, not being recognized in an introverted way, which means that there can be compulsive actions and habits that the person is involved in because of this underlying insecurity about themselves.
That obsessiveness of Pluto.
Yeah, obsessiveness with Pluto. Pluto makes us obsess about our fears.
Yes.
When there's a Saturn-Pluto conjunction innately. Now, on the other hand, when a person, this kind of aspect, it's forcing you to have your fears be in your face all the time. It takes a lot more effort to suppress them. Other people who have a Saturn that's not in aspect to Pluto, it's a little easier to put your Saturn in a safe place, your own personal insecurities. You can cover them over at certain times in your life and certain periods in the day. But Pluto doesn't want a Saturn person to do that. Pluto doesn't want the person with the Saturn conjunct Pluto to do that. He wants them to, it's there, it's always in your face. So if you say, okay, I'm going to accept that I have this deep and profound terror, and it's certainly, when we're dealing with Pluto, the reason why people come in these generational packs now, which is quite interesting because they didn't used to do that. Before we had discovered Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, people didn't incarnate in packs like this. There weren't, we didn't have massive generation gaps.
Wow.
Back in previous centuries, the way that we do now.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and people come in these collective packs because of their past life experience. So there's profound, deep past life experience of something that happened that really devastated this person's. You know, it's funny. I keep having a hard time finding the words to describe this, and that happens if I'm feeling like a person isn't going to hear it, and they're going to feel stressed by it. But it's a sense of someone that had their dignity destroyed by others. That's probably the way to describe it, or that's how it felt to them. And so to get in there and find out what that is and release it and heal it, then a person can turn that all around. And they can, because it's such a deep-seated form of transformation, then they've got this capacity to transform and change themselves on any level, and to be a real leader within their own generation. Because what their generation is just sort of somewhat aware of, always bothered by, but not as fully conscious about, a Saturn-Pluto conjunction person has been forced to be conscious about. And if they work with that situation that's forcing them to be conscious, they then gain so much understanding and so much strength that they can really lead other people.
I'm just thinking about a question that was sort of arising for me as you were talking, and it sounds like you are already answering it. And just to frame it also, if we're thinking about the evolutionary purpose of such a placement, would you say that it's, you know, to make something so obvious so as to, you know, that it will necessarily be looked at and hopefully healed? Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it is one of those aspects that indicates that the person has, it's almost very much a compulsory subject in Earth School. I'm planned, I'm definitely getting at this one this time.
Yes, right.
There are certain aspects in the chart that will have that quality, and this one does for sure.
Okay, so great. So is there anything more about that
I think that's
Saturn, Pluto, and Leo?
Saturn, okay. That's the Saturn and Leo, or the Saturn Pluto conjunction in Leo. I think that's what I would have to say about that.
Okay.
The next Saturn Pluto conjunction was the one in Libra, and there was a point during this whole Saturn Pluto conjunction, part of it Saturn went into Scorpio for a period of time, even though there was still a conjunction between Pluto and Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
So that
But it was out of sign.
it was what's called an out of sign conjunction, because
Yeah.
Saturn was at the very, very beginning of Scorpio and Pluto was at the very, very end of Libra.
Mm-hmm.
And that Saturn Pluto conjunction started at the end of November of 1981.
Mm-hmm.
And it went until the beginning of May of 1982. And by mid-August, it came back again. So somebody born from the end of November of 81 till about the beginning of May of 82, or someone born from mid-August to the end of November of 1982. Let me just see what's happening here. Oh yeah, no, sorry. Mid-August of 1982, by the end of November of 1982, it was still in aspect, but then Saturn was in Scorpio.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went in and out of Libra and Scorpio, back and forth because of retrograding. By October of 1983, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction was complete.
Mm-hmm.
So that was taking place while Pluto was in Libra. And while Pluto's in Libra, it's interesting, there's all these collective changes that go on when Pluto is going through a certain sign, and everyone experiences that collective change. Everyone born during that time period has that collective change continuing at an even deeper level, and it's part of their own generational sensitivity.
Yes.
So when Pluto was in Libra, there was a lot of change in marriage, in our concept of what intimate relationship is all about. Massive changes in society that took place at that time that marriage and intimate relationships, committed partnerships are not the same as they were before Pluto went through Libra. There was a distinct change that took place then.
Yep.
And that's what happens. Things do change in a pretty permanent way, whatever sign Pluto goes through.
Yeah.
What it means for the individual is that there's a deep sensitivity, fear, concern about that area of life. My intimate relationships, my partnerships, is something going to go wrong? Is something going to mess up? I've got to make sure I get this right.
Yes.
There's a deep tension in that generation.
Yeah.
In terms of that part of life. So once we put Saturn also in Libra, conjunct it, then we have a person who has a lot of karmic fears and imbalances in terms of relationships. And they're coming in, whether they have it conjunct Pluto or not, coming in to correct that and to overcome those imbalances and those fears. So there is a tremendous fear, tremendous anxiety, tremendous need for profound transformation of how you deal with your intimate relationships, how they deal with you, because a lot of times it's more a fear of how they're going to deal with you. You might, there's plenty of people who have this aspect who themselves can be a very good partner, but they've had the experience over lifetimes of not receiving positive experiences from others. And it's so embedded in the subconscious that fear of that can draw these heavy, intense situations. But it also does allow a person to grow and change and develop a very deep and profound understanding of relationship and partnership that they would not otherwise experience.
Saturn has the one of its associations is mastery, right? So when we do the work in wherever Saturn falls for us in a chart, then we might feel that we have more work to do than others in that area. But when we do, we actually can experience that mastery quality.
Yeah. Oh yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm sure there's some really profoundly effective relationship experts, counselors, and coaches who have the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Libra and who have a really profound, incredible partnership in their own personal lives too.
Right.
And others that are still struggling. But if someone is really, really struggling with this, understand that you have been struggling with it for a lot of lifetimes, but just like the other Saturn-Pluto conjunction, you're here in this lifetime to make this change, to make this transformation, and to fulfill that part of your life.
Now, I have a question going back to Pluto being in Leo or Libra, but you were talking about how in that period during, Pluto Libra, there's a transformation, profound transformation going on a collective level around relationship.
Mm-hmm.
People that are born with a natal Pluto in Libra is that batch of humans.
Yes.
Are they, I know that you spoke to the inner experience of having that, which is that sense of deep concern and sensitivity to that area of life.
Exactly.
Do you think that in terms of more of the evolutionary purpose and the sort of, what that creates for how that person, that human is affecting the rest of the environment and the world, do they have a sort of, would you say, and I don't even know if you have, something that you want to share on this, but would you say that they have some kind of a mission to assist
Yes.
in that transformation or to continue that
Yes.
transformation?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, they're going to be living it out themselves.
Right.
And as a collective, they're going to continue that transformation. So if you think about the change in our relationship knowledge and the structures of relationships that occurred while Pluto was going through Libra,
Yeah.
was really, that was kind of, it was just a prelude to what the actual generation is going to bring about, or is bringing about, the changes and the transformations the generation is bringing about as they change their personal lives, they change the collective at the same time.
And that's a beautiful, I just got a beautiful feeling inside because it made me think back to the Pluto in Leo generation and how, so there's been this question that people will say, oh, well, was that whole experiment a failure? And the baby boomers that tried to change government and the acid experiments, LSD and all of that, like, well, there was this heyday, but then everything kind of just went back to being bad and oppressive. And what you're saying is actually, yes, there was this kind of very big, very obvious manifestation, and those baby boomers carried on that quality their whole lives.
Yeah.
And you say one of my favorite things that you say is that, consciousness can only truly be transformed one person at a time.
Yes.
That lasting change.
Yep. Yep.
Right. If it's going to last, it's not about having 5 years of, a heyday of some expression of something. It's about that one, individual consciousness changing in person by person. And so perhaps if we look much deeper, if we were able to have that X-ray vision of what these Pluto in Leo folks have really held for us throughout, then we would maybe, have a much different, our perspective maybe really expanded on that.
Yes, definitely.
Mm.
Now I did leave things hanging with the Saturn and Scorpio part, which I'm sure was born in those times. It's like, wait a minute, what about my Saturn and Scorpio? So I just want to quickly check, when was it, because I know it was, it started at the end of November 82, that Saturn was in Scorpio. And so Saturn was in Scorpio until, I guess around May 6th or 7th, depending on where you were in the world at the time. And part of that time, when it was retrograding back into Libra, it's in the 29th degree. So when people have something in the 29th degree, you're going to have it in both signs. So that means a person who has Saturn in 29 degrees Libra, or any planet in 29 degrees, it's in both signs. It's in Libra and in Scorpio. Yeah, and then it was back in Libra. So we're really looking at kind of the winter and spring of that year, 82, 83, where Saturn would be in Scorpio. So we don't have that same intensity of the signs being the same, but there's still a strong intensity of, I'm subconsciously concerned about relationships, and I'm afraid that I might not be desirable enough, I might not be wanted by a partner. That's where that intensity comes in, and where the person needs to look at what they really have within themselves that is of value. And Pluto will force that issue.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so I think we probably finished up our Saturn Pluto conjunction video.
Yeah. And so,
Have anything else to say, Katya?
well, I'm just thinking about, folks that are born into this
Yeah, well, that's right.
Pluto, Saturn, Capricorn
Yes,
conjunction.
yes.
Yeah. Is there, I mean, of course, we've talked about the qualities so much,
Yes.
but is there any kind of a Reader's Digest version?
Yeah, and I mean, people are having children born during this time period.
Exactly.
What does it mean for my child, and how can I guide my child? Thank you for bringing
Yeah,
that. I meant
that's what
to,
I mean.
I meant to mention that. Yeah, well, there's very much that sense of being involved in a collective transformation,
Mm-hmm.
and of being in a generation that is sensitive constantly to how is our world being managed and structured and monitored by the powers that be. What kind of larger collective institutions are we creating? How do we perfect and transform our collective institutions?
Mm-hmm.
And then their own personal Saturn is, well, I've got a really big sense of responsibility because it's Saturn in Capricorn. And what if I blow it?
Yes, that fear of failure.
That fear of failure. And Saturn and Capricorn people also have a tendency to have a very strong, highly developed sense of responsibility. Now, some of them it's so strong that they sometimes some give up. I'm not going to take responsibility for anything. I'm incapable. Mm-hmm. But that's a reaction to the fears and to the underlying feeling of responsibility. So we have a very responsible child who's taking the welfare of our collective institutions and our collective structures seriously. So for a parent, that would be about helping the child take life a little less seriously.
Yes.
And realize that everything is okay. It'll get to where it needs to get to anyway. And you are competent and you are skilled. For any Saturn and Capricorn child, it's good for them to learn to take things a step at a time. Mm-hmm. Saturn and Capricorn people tend to see the goal. They're very good at knowing exactly what the outcome is that needs to be done. That's really important in this physical world. So take a step at a time. Yes. So to just to let the child know that there's an overall success process going on in our larger collective evolution, and there's an overall success process going on in your development and in your capabilities.
Because they can tend to see the mountain, right, without realizing that actually getting up the mountain is just a series of one step after another. And as long as they're engaged in that process of taking step after step, that's really all they can do. Exactly. Yeah.
Instead there's this tendency to feel like, well, what if I get up to 7,000 feet and or and my line breaks and I will have blown it.
That's a lot of weight to carry for one. Yes. Is there that feeling of just kind of maybe taking on too much, taking the weight of the world on their shoulders?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So needed humans at this time, and we want to just make it bearable for them.
Very true. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Welcome to the world too.
Welcome to the world. Yeah. Mm-hmm, yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything else, or we?
I think that's everything. And thank you again for reminding me about the current Saturn Pluto conjunction generation coming in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy it came.
Yeah.
All righty.